John Brown was an activist abolitionist who was tired of all the speeches, sermons, and petitions being nothing but words. He wanted action.
John Brown was in Kansas during its tumultuous beginnings of joining the Union. He helped lead the anti-slavery movement and caused several deaths. Bleeding Kansas is sometimes referred to as a small civil war in that territory because it divided its citizens, and violently. Because John Brown wanted to start an uprising by arming the enslaved people, his idea was to travel back and forth across the free states, soliciting support and money for helping them rise up against their oppressors. He also escorted several freedom seekers across Iowa as he traveled. One such trip was recorded and followed by reporters, and that trip across Iowa gives us the John Brown Freedom Trail. He began in Civil Bend, Iowa on February 4, 1859. At Civil Bend, the group stayed at the home of Dr. Ira Blanchard. The Blanchard House was a known stop on the Underground Railroad, and Brown often found shelter there during his trips to and from Kansas, helping freedom seekers on their trip to freedom. Today, the only physical reminder of this stop on the Underground Railroad is the Blanchard Cemetery, which stood adjacent to the Blanchard home. After overnighting at the Blanchard House in Civil Bend, John Brown and his group traveled to Tabor, Iowa, arriving on February 5, 1859. Tabor was an anti-slavery stronghold. It was known as a staging area for Kansas-bound free soil settlers, and the Reverend John Todd House was used as a place to store arms and provisions during the Bleeding Kansas conflict. Brown spent a good deal of time in Tabor prior to 1859. This time, Brown received a cool welcome when he arrived in Tabor. Locals were displeased with Brown and his recent actions. He had gone beyond his regular actions of assisting freedom seekers and had begun to actively free the enslaved people and kill the owners.
This change of attitude is reflected today against John Brown's actions. When you see people writing, they call him an activist, and they talk about several extremists following him on his journey east.
By February 17th, John Brown and his travelers reached the Jordan farmhouse. John and his 10 men, all heavily armed, and the 12 freedom seekers arrived and stayed overnight in the timber just west of the house. Favored by mild winter weather, John Brown and his crew continued east to Grinnell, Iowa on February 20th, 1859. They stayed 2 days, and Brown developed his plan to attack the U.S. arsenal at Harper's Ferry during his time with town founder Josiah B. Grinnell. Grinnell was a Vermont native, a Congressionalist minister, and part of the strong anti-slavery movement in town. Grinnellians gave John Brown $25 and provisions for several days. On the evening of March 9, 1859, John Brown, with 12 men, women, and children that had escaped slavery from 3 southwest Missouri farms, plus his own men, arrived in West Liberty, Iowa. The party had spent the last 2 weeks at Springdale awaiting rail transportation arrangements. Upon arriving at their West Liberty rail connection, an engineer operating the first morning's eastbound train from Iowa City dropped off an empty boxcar near the mill. Soon, as friendly residents looked on, the freedom seekers boarded the boxcar. The train left West Liberty the next morning. It was bound for Chicago, with the boxcar placed between the engine and the express car. Within 2 days, the group would pass through Chicago and Detroit, where freedom seekers would take a ferry to Windsor, Ontario, Canada, and their freedom. Only 7 months later, Brown and his men would attempt to seize the federal armory and arsenal at Harper's Ferry in what is now West Virginia. 2 months later, Brown would be hung for treason. His death was mourned by many who vehemently opposed slavery. There were songs and paintings depicting his death as a martyr.
There are several marching songs that celebrate John Brown that were popular during the Civil War with Union Army soldiers, but the most popular now is sung to the Battle Hymn of the Republic with lyrics by William Weston Patton.
Glory, glory.